over the next 2 days at the Menaselem Conference Center. And this is very much about trying to understand the cities of the future, of which Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and so many of the urban developments here are part, the cities of the future. And what we want to do over the next 90 minutes, and that's how long it'll be, is try and take you to the cutting edge of where the issues are, both the positive and the negative and the qualifying issues about the speed of urbanization and the problems of keeping up with the enormity of the challenges, whether in the deserts here or in so many areas around the world, including from China. We're going to be looking at how the cities of the future can be built in a world of climate change and resource scarcity. Secondly, how the region here can tackle the issue of sustainable urbanization in a period of marked population growth. But those questions, of course, apply not just to the Gulf and the UAE, but also right around the world. Every single city, every single conurbation is facing equal stresses. And thirdly, what about the leadership here in the UAE in planning and building the future's sustainable cities globally? So a lot to get through. We're not going to be too technical, but we want to take it right to the cutting edge. I'm going to ask each of the 5 panelists to introduce themselves, because they'll probably do a far better job than I can explaining their qualifications for being here and what they do. Khaled, Awad.
Yes, thanks, Nick. Hi, everybody. I'm Khaled Awad.
Can you hear everybody or not?
No.
Okay.
Let me try to get
Move the microphone a little closer to you, can you?
Okay, I'm Khaled Awad. I'm heading a company called Grenea, which invests and develops eco projects that try to achieve zero carbon emission. I used to run Masdar City for the last 4 years, and previously I was in the construction industry in the Gulf for the last 25 years. So this is where I come from. I'm now focusing on investing in eco projects because I think this is what is needed to get these projects running.
Phil Gordon, from one desert to another.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you all for having me here. My name is Phil Gordon. I'm the mayor of the city of Phoenix in Arizona in the States. It's the 5th largest city in the United States. Most people, even in the US, aren't aware of that. We've been the fastest growing city, so it'll be topical for the last 2 decades in the United States. And we're a desert and have, like Dubai and Abu Dhabi, I think, learned for generations how to, what should be sustainable and what shouldn't be, and look forward to talking about that.
Thank you. Konrad, Otto-Zimmermann.
Yeah, I'm Konrad Otto-Zimmermann. I'm heading ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, which is the largest association of local governments worldwide, of cities, metropolises, towns, counties, regions, particularly dedicated to sustainable development, and our programs include programs addressing climate change, biodiversity, water management, sustainable procurement, and general environmental management. So we represent 1,200 local governments in 70 countries.
Thank you. Fahd Al-Rasheed.
Yeah, my name is Fahd Al-Rasheed. I am the CEO and Managing Director of Emaar Economic City, which is a publicly listed company in Saudi Arabia focused on the development of King Abdullah Economic City. King Abdullah Economic City is a city for 2 million people that we are building about 100 kilometers north of Jeddah, and we are looking at a lot of issues of urbanization and sustainability in our development. Thank you.
And what is your connection with Emaar?
Emaar is a 32% investor in the company that I run.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Xuefeng from Tianjin, which is, what, about 150 miles from Beijing?
Yes, thank you. I'm a vice mayor of Tianjin. The city, it's 13 million people in the city. It's nearby Beijing. The fast train from Beijing to Tianjin, just 29 minutes. So this time is my good opportunity to go to come Dubai. This is the second time for me to come here. So Dubai port has good relationship with the Tianjin port and a joint venture in Tianjin. Thank you.
I should tell you, as someone who was in Tianjin for the World Economic Forum 2 months ago,
yeah.
It is an enormous city which is changing extraordinarily fast. 2 years ago, there was an enormous amount of concrete. Now, all those buildings are finished, and the speed of development is quite breathtaking. Can I just ask you, where do you expect the size of Tianjin to be in, say, 5 years?
The next 5 years?
What would you expect the size of your city to be?
Population? I think so maybe, 15 billion. 15
No,
million.
billion.
Sorry, million, sorry, billion. Million, huh? Okay. 15 million. 15 million.
And the speed at which it will
And the
get
speed
larger space-wise?
for space, 11,000 million square kilometers.
Okay.
Mm.
But it is moving enormously swiftly. Let me try and set the scene. There was actually a very good supplement on the future of cities in the Financial Times a couple of months ago. Let me just help fashion the debate by quoting a couple of things here to you to help understand the challenges and the frontiers. For example, the architecture critic, Edwin Heathcote, talking about a problem with green architecture. Architecture is not green, end of story, but the act of building is no longer sustainable. It is now an industrial process, and he describes it of fearsome energy consumption. And secondly, a similar useful reflection for our discussion from Ren Koolhaas, who's the Dutch founder of OMA, the architecture firm. He's talking about the UAE and Dubai, and he talks about city centers around the world in which no one seems to be a full-time resident. Dubai, for instance, is a city that is both permanently empty and permanently full in ways that many of you will recognize. And it demonstrates simultaneously density and hollowness. So these are some of the paradoxes we'll try and raise and offer solutions for in the next now 80 minutes or so. What I'd like to do is ask a few questions to each of the panelists and then open it to you from the floor. There are microphones around, and I'd like you to come and challenge them or ask questions or clarify your own perceptions. And Khaled Awad, first of all, I'd like to ask you about Masdar, because after all, it's being held up by the UAE, by Abu Dhabi, as an extraordinary paragon and ideal of the way cities can be built. But already it's been announced that 3.3 billion is being taken out of the budget, and much of it is going to slow down. What is the implication going to be in terms of the model being set, or at least hoped for, here in the UAE? Does that mean the model is being diluted already?
I think you have to look at Masdar in context.
Wait a minute, get the microphone open.
Yeah, I think you have to look at Masdar in context. When Masdar started, the first thing they were building was the university. And the reason they did that, because they needed a knowledge engine in the city. Without it, you cannot really achieve the sustainability targets that they had in mind. So with this, you give credit to a city which starts with a knowledge engine. Now that knowledge engine has been built and it has been inaugurated a few days ago. It has the first tenants of the city, the students, and it has also faculty from around the world that are focusing on advancing research in sustainable development, sustainable cities, carbon capture, and other fields of the university. So from that angle, Masdar is still an engine for knowledge about sustainable cities. Now, at the same time, it reflects what the real estate in the country is about. There is a slowdown in the real estate sector, and it has to reflect what the real estate is going through. And that's why the slowdown in the cut in budget, which is actually reflecting also in cut in cost, because the cost of building has gone down. Now, whether they back off from the original vision or not, I see some hesitation in the way they're managing the city, but I think the engine that they have already, which is a university focused, graduate studies focused on research in sustainability, is going to drive this forward.
But is the vision being diluted?
Well, I think the future will have to tell us more about it. There is still hesitation now in what they are doing. So they are not clear about whether they want to continue forward with the same vision or they're backing off to get the market and the real estate problem sorted out.
Right, let me ask more about the principles here in the region that you know well. You're now moving, you're no longer officially associated with Masdar in that sense. How much is there a sensitivity in this region to the issues of sustainability as we look at a place like Dubai and we look at many of the other cities and countries as well, like Bahrain, like Qatar, and so on?
Let me be blunt here a bit, because I think there is no business case for sustainability in the Gulf. I mean, with subsidies on energy and water, with the way legislation is lacking on driving the business case and the business model for sustainability. Sustainability today is just a wishful thinking, a good initiative by some people to feel good about what they're doing. It's more a kind of altruism and trying to show that there is awareness going on. There is no business case, and unless you have a business case driving sustainability, this is going to be a theoretical story. And I think this is what the region lacks. There is no legislation that is driving a business model and a business case to really get these things sorted. And with all what's going on right now, we're far from having something that's sustainable in terms of building green. And you can see some initiatives here and there, and some people trying to get their master plan and urbanizing strategy right. But at the end of the day, the bottom line will be in the hands of developers who will feel that, why should we do that? Why should we save energy and water by investing in energy efficiency measures where the energy and water is free? Who's going to get this?
Here we are just a few days from Cancun and the hope for moving forward on issues of sustainability and climate change and control. What about the argument, though, that you get economic growth now from sustainability by changing your models? Has that begun to embed at all here?
The investment in economical impact is not in the hands of developers. It's in the hands of the governments. So it's up to the governments to actually create the legislation that will translate into economic benefits on their GDP and others. Without that, the developers have financial interest, not economic interest. And this is a big difference. You have to see where developers and where the people who are holding the construction, the asset owners, are driving this forward. And that's why we have the conflict of, or the difference between what the developers think and what the government is thinking.
Final question at this stage, if I may, Khaled. You are a fellow of the American Concrete Institute and the Institute of Concrete Technology. How much is the concrete business, the cement business, really seized of the expectation that there has to be sustainability? I remember in this part of the world literally driving through almost a fog of concrete dust on occasions. In my own personal view, if you want to really address sustainability properly, you need to tackle two things: transportation and concrete construction. And coming back to your question, concrete and cement in particular emits 5% of the total global CO2. So if you don't really address it properly, you have 5%, which is a big chunk of the whole emissions that you're not touching. And I think nobody is really addressing the cement issue and the concrete issue properly today. But the big companies, and I won't name them here, say they are.
Well, frankly, technically speaking, they have the solution. But for them to change to this solution, they need to disrupt all their industrial process, which is something
which costs them money.
And they wouldn't do it. And I think that applies to many other industries. So to change the cement industry from a zero carbon cement or a very low carbon cement, from 80% carbon cement to a zero carbon cement, that will take a huge industrial disruption for so many factories around the world. And who would do that? Who will take the first step in doing it? The technical solution is more or less available, provided you have mass and scale for it. But nobody is willing to do it.
That's a rather bleak prospect. Now, Konrad, let me turn to you. I did say I'd start with you, but I thought as we were in the UAE, I'd turn to Khaled first of all. When you look at as representative of a large number of local governments, and we've just heard about the relationship between government and business, what is your reflection on this relationship and how vital that is, or how obstructive it can be to moving forward on the future of cities and making them more sustainable?
Talking about the future of cities, let me say at first that we need to look at the future that the cities will be living in or have to exist in. And I think what I would like to say is when we look at the global scenarios, then we will not only over short or long run out of oil and gas, we'll run out of many minerals. We expect climate change to result in sea level rise and in severe water stress in many regions, continued desertification, and many other impacts. When we look at the fact that an increasing number of people are living in cities, so first of all, the global population will go from 6.5 billion to 9 or 10 billion in the next 40 years. then we'll have an increased urbanization, which will lead not only, like nowadays, half of the people living in cities, but 2/3 of people living in cities. And cities will be the places where people are not only living and working and need their livelihood, but where they are stuck because they are dependent on resource flows from outside. And those get scarcer. So we will go towards a world of more scarcity, and this is just the reality. So this means we need, as cities, to become extremely eco-efficient. We need to become disaster and climate resilient. We need to develop a green urban economy. And we need, in the end, to achieve health and happiness for the population. I think those 4 goals are the overriding goals, where I would say that the goals of the past, namely to be just the biggest, the largest, the highest, the richest, that's the goals of yesterday. Nowadays, we need to be eco-efficient, resilient, have a green economy, and create happiness.
When you hear what we've just heard from Khaled, a reflection which is pretty blunt about the way these issues are seen here in the UAE, how does that compare with the more than 1,000 councils that you represent? In other words, how much is sustainability now embedded in their thinking and their priorities as the way forward to make cities habitable and enjoyable places to be, or tolerant places to be?
I would say that already 40 years ago, a development started mainly in Europe, United States, partly in Australia, where cities have undergone a growth and were having an increased pollution, air pollution, increased environmental burden, and citizens were then thinking, is this the right way to go? And we're trying to rethink and to change the course. And of course, it had taken some decades, but now I would say that there are hundreds, thousands of cities in the world that go on an environmental path, on a sustainability path. Of course, they don't have achieved everything yet they want to achieve, but they are going towards low carbon, they are going towards protecting biodiversity, they are going towards water saving. And I see that while this was a development that was following, let's say, a certain amount of affluence, in other parts of the world like this one, exactly in those 4 decades, cities were built basically from scratch that did not follow the path of eco-efficiency and the path of water saving, but just the opposite. And I think it's time now that also the new cities are swinging around to the course of sustainability and would follow a development pattern and actually transform themselves into eco-efficient cities.
But when you hear Khaled say, quote, there's no business case for sustainability seen in this part of the world, how much is that repeated elsewhere among the councils that you represent? No business case for sustainability.
This is very different in the world. The issue whether there's a business case is maybe asked in contexts where cities are seen like a business and run like a business and seen as investment objects. And I must say that in many other parts of the world, cities are more seen as places where people live, as communities, where the city itself and the built structures and the infrastructure are more meant to serve people's needs, where there is an understanding of a city being a community, expression of a community, and not like just a business. So I think the question of a business case, it may be there or not in the end. If no business case is seen, a city may run even more into problems by being not efficient and bringing problems for the future.
Even though he's sitting on my left, let me reinterpret that there's a blind eye almost turned to the issue. How does that reflect in many of the councils that you represent? Are blind eyes being turned to the absolute imperative of sustainability or not?
No, I would say the majority of councils, that at least those we are working with, are on the course towards sustainability and see this as a goal that they want to achieve not only in the long term, but already in the midterm. And they are really instituting programs to transform their cities into sustainable cities in a couple of years, let's say 5 or 10 years.
And is non-action seen as an option by the cities you represent?
No.
Okay, well, let's go to the 5th largest city in the United States, Phoenix, one desert to another. And Phil Gordon, there's a lot to talk about in your city, but I want to highlight a couple of things. You talk about, or certainly your office talk about, your administration focusing on 3 top priorities: public safety, education, and jobs. That doesn't include sustainability and the future of the city as a place.
Well, Nick, it does in the sense of, to me, sustainability, in order to be successful, has to sustain itself. And by that I mean, if it isn't based on economics, a business model that not only government will use, particularly today in the world economic challenges, but the private sector, it won't work. So to me, a city has to be safe. It has to have a highly educated workforce so that people have a future in the city. And then, to me, people won't stay in a city unless they're jobs. And I've always said they're intertwined. So Phoenix's sustainability, when I became mayor 8 years ago, was to invest economically and education-wise in sustainable renewable energy. And I think, if I may just get a plug in, I believe the reason why particularly the private sector hasn't embraced sustainable technology and initiatives as much as the public sector is because initially it was sold strictly as an environmental, very important. Today it's really an economic model, and I think, at least in Phoenix, the more we're educating the private sector and the residents that there's an immediate return in dollars, in savings, not only to government, which is their money, but also to the individuals. We've seen a much more embracing community, and the more the community embrace private sector, the more jobs are created, the less crime that occurs. So to me, the whole key of Phoenix's success, which has been the fastest growing city in the U.S. for over 2 decades, has been based on sustainable projects.
But does a city have to equal a massive sprawl, consuming vast acreages of real estate without a real heart anymore?
Well, the paradigm in Phoenix used to be, since the 1950s, like Dubai, we came of age around 1950, and like Dubai as a desert city, have grown rapidly since then. Phoenix sprawled. We're 550 square miles, 55 miles north to south. Before, larger used to be the best in terms of size. I think that the city itself, its residents, have learned that is very costly. Commute time, environmental, economics, to put in infrastructure. And despite the economy, the area of city of Phoenix that has prospered in the last few years has been the central city.
So are you changing mindsets?
We are, I hope so. Unfortunately, the development community resists that restriction, which is voluntary, in terms of not redeveloping where it's harder in the central city, because there's buildings there, there's not as much land. On the other hand, people are buying now in the city, businesses are investing. So I think the economic model, the paradigm has changed, and even when I believe the economy changes worldwide, I think the way cities have done business and where residents live are going to change. The cities are going to become more urban than they are today. More people are going to live in it. And the answer to your question is we can't afford, at least in Phoenix, to allow sprawl anymore. It's just no way to pay for it.
One important comparison between Dubai and Phoenix is, of course, the metro system. And you've launched a metro system, 20 miles, 28 kilometers. And of course, that's exactly what Dubai has just opened in the last year. And I was asking about mindsets, cities which have been built on the car and use of the internal combustion engine to get around. Do you believe that the mindset will change significantly, that people will not use their car, get on a bus, get on a metro, and make that journey that they were making before, but using public transport, or not?
Not only do I believe it, but we've proven that that's the case. City of Phoenix was built on cars. If every family didn't have 2 or 3, people didn't believe they were successful. The 20-mile ridership, which I may say is the same manufacturer of cars in Phoenix as Dubai, coincidentally, is now 40% over the most conservative estimate 2 years ago of ridership, despite the economy, despite the slowdown. So it's been very successful, not only as mass transportation, but as an economic development tool. It has brought that redevelopment back to the central city.
What incentive was needed to make people get out of their autos?
You know what? One, I think when gasoline went up, more people started to see it, but we didn't give an incentive. It was a desired use change. People liked the fact that they could get on a light rail system and go either to work or to a baseball game or a cultural event. And it's unique in Phoenix, but it has spurred development, and now the premium is along the light rail line.
Right, let me just ask you one other question. Your 17-point Green Phoenix plan, don't give me all 17 points, but what are you taking away from that as the way of the future to keep a city active, vibrant, and livable in?
Well, one, as quickly as I can, the 17-point plan, which the Secretary of Energy of the United States endorsed 2 years ago, is a very comprehensive program, but that's recognizing that sustainability is not just water or air, but it goes from job training all the way to transportation and the obvious things. So our whole budget, every policy back to public safety and education incorporates the principles of sustainability. You can't really have it unless it's an entire ecosystem, literally and figuratively. Water is a good example. We're a desert like Dubai is. The city of Phoenix, as I said, has grown by about 500,000 people in the last decade, and yet we are using less water today in Phoenix per capita and gallon-wise than we used a decade ago. Not anything by law reduction, but by education and technology. I think we're the only city at least in the United States, that's been able to reach that accomplishment, and we're a growing city.
All right, now look, these are issues which I'd like you to pick up with each other, but what I'm trying to do, particularly for the audience, is just to at least set the frame for a wider discussion. Let's go to Saudi Arabia now, to Fahd al-Rasheed. When you hear these kind of principles, the problems of Masdar, the challenges of Arizona, the fact that not embracing sustainability is simply not an option when we hear Konrad, how are you approaching this in Saudi Arabia? You're going to tell me everything's fine and enormous investment and so on, but there are principles here about how you get it embedded in a different way of thinking about cities.
I think if you look at the issue just from the environmental aspect, you miss the point of sustainability as a whole. Sustainability as a whole is also about the economic sustainability as well as the social sustainability of a society. So if you look at these three issues combined, you find that the governments in the region are actually investing a lot of effort in sustainability. For example, a lot of the countries are looking at their priorities in terms of economic development and social development. Economic development in terms of creating new industries, investing in infrastructure, etc. Social sustainability in terms of investing in education and educating their populations. I think we really have to broaden the view on sustainability to take those into account as a part and parcel of the policies and priorities of these governments. Now, a lot of investments are happening in environmental sustainability issues. Maybe they are not advertised as so, or their benefits are not addressed in that manner. For example, when Dubai invests in the metro, 30% of energy and use and emissions come from transportation. So the worst kind of emissions are the ones that you actually have in traffic jams. So when Dubai invests in a metro, that actually saves a lot of the energy use that you waste in those kinds of in jams, etc.
And do you think there's a clear transfer between the use of energy in a car and the new use of energy in a metro? Let me be clear. I mean, it's all very well having a metro, but are enough people using it? In other words,
I think we're talking about, it's so complicated to talk about mass transport, etc., and its use, but we can talk about it. Saudi Arabia is doing the same between three cities, actually, connecting regionally Medina, Jeddah, and Mecca through a high-speed rail, and spending a lot of money doing it. That will certainly save a lot of energy. Actually building master planned communities that is a very important component of sustainability, because you don't want places where people have to work and then they have to drive somewhere very far away to actually live. So places where you can live, work, and play, and I can give you numerous examples in the region where this is happening today, and basically the latest in terms of community planning is happening. It's actually very impressive in terms of development, and give you numerous examples. Finally, in terms of addressing the sustainability question, for example, what we are doing today, we are building automated buildings today. 30% energy savings on these buildings. You can say yes, that there is no business case, but we're doing it anyway because we are building in a greenfield environment where you can actually leverage.
Is 30% enough, do you think?
No, I think it's a very good start, and it's a lot more than what you can do. It's an opportunity you need to leverage.
But shouldn't you be trying to do it at 80% or something like that?
I think that is a good question, a good challenge. However, I think you have to look at it in totality. For example, Masdar is a very good example of trying to really test new technologies. If you want the private sector to invest in these new areas, really the government has to take a big role in addressing new technologies in terms of performance, material. Concrete is a very good example in terms of new methods of construction, metal framing, etc. In terms of automated buildings, in terms of smart grids. I mean, all of those technologies really need to be tested and need to be promoted by the government so that the private sector can take them on with as little risk as possible. The problem is, honestly, today, these technologies are all very new, and in the region, it's not known whether they would work or not. So you need the government to say, look, these are certified, you can use them, and by doing so, you can save so and so on.
But let me check again with what Khaled said, quote, no business case for sustainability. Do you agree with him?
I think on some components, yes, of course. When you subsidize energy, it makes the business case of any energy-saving devices less appealing. But the point is, again, because you're building from greenfield and there's a lot of developments, it makes sense to take on the latest technologies, the latest designs as part and parcel of your development.
But let me be clear, you're saying that your company is not wanting to take the initiative beyond the way the government is instructing you to build.
No, that's not what I said.
I'm just checking. That's why I'm checking.
What I'm saying is actually we have an opportunity to do it voluntarily. But when you're talking about taking on new technologies that might or might not work, as a private developer, you don't want to take on that risk. So you need them to be tested and certified by the government and promoted in order for you to adopt them with more confidence.
Phil wants to come in quickly, and I won't forget you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, but Phil, you just want to come in quickly about the economics of this.
Two quick things. One on the light rail system. I think it's a mistake, particularly in growth cities that don't have it, not to use the mass transportation. Not only does it create the jobs, but everyone riding it does take cars off the road or prevents more cars from coming on.
And I'll ask about the Tianjin experience in a moment.
And if you think about it, we've subsidized historically roads with the cars. I mean, the cost of a highway, of a street, isn't paid for by the user itself, so it's a good investment. The other thing on the business model, I think it depends in what area. We put together a business model where it's private sector in the city of Phoenix, where anyone that wants a solar system in their home for full operation, brand new, state-of-the-art, guaranteed 20 years, it's the bank and the private solar company that will install it and guarantee that their utility costs as a consumer is less than with the lease and with the utility bill than their current utility bill. The bank is making money and the consumer is saving money. Over 1,000 homes in the last 18 months have used that system. So you can make money in the renewable solar energy.
Khaled, quickly, do you want to come in before I go to Tianjin?
Just a quick one. This is an example of a business case that you Phil just mentioned. When I mean sustainability, I mean we need a radical change to make the sustainability initiative going. Not just small changes, some rating systems to get our buildings look better or look less bad. We need a radical change. And this business case for a radical change doesn't exist. That's what I mean. There is no business case for a radical change, which is much needed.
Okay. Right, do prepare your questions, and there are 4 microphones, so get the microphone too, so we don't waste any time. Let me go to Dr. Wren now. Let's just pick up, can we, on the way the mindset is changing. I can't adequately describe the enormity of the change in your city of Tianjin, which is a major port, an enormous port, developing very fast. You have enormous industrial areas which are building, including Airbus, including Vestas, the wind turbine factory, and vast. But it takes an awfully long time to get anywhere in your city because of the distances, which are quite extraordinary. But let me ask you one question about the way people travel in a big city like yours. What is your reflection about how people are prepared to use public transport in your city, given the speed at which your city is developing? Are they prepared to use public transport because you are building an awful lot of new roads as well?
Yes, public transportation is very important for the city. So we have a plan. No, we have established three lines for subway, and we will build, another 3 lines subway in the next 5 years. So because just I mentioned, Tianjin, it's a large city, 13 million people. Maybe next 5 years, 15 million people. We are facing the big challenges for, traffic. Binhai New area, it's about 40 square kilometers from downtown to the Binhai New area.
Exactly.
It's a poor city. We need to build high-speed way and to build light train from downtown to Binhai New area. And we have a faster train from Beijing to Tianjin to Binhai New area and to airport. Another faster train from Shanghai to Beijing will be finished end of next year. Just 3 hours and 30 minutes from Shanghai to Tianjin.
But still, we have to talk about your city, the people who live there, who go to work every day, who have to get from A to B. Many of them want to have cars. They want hybrid cars as well. But the moment everyone has enough money for cars, the traffic jams get bigger and bigger and bigger. How much is the kind of thing we've been hearing from Arizona and the kind of thing we're seeing here, how much of that is an integral planning priority for your city to get people around, large numbers of people around for the city of the future?
In this city, we have 1.6 million cars, not too much. Beijing, 5 million cars. So it's not big traffic jam in Tianjin.
Yet.
Okay, right now it's okay. Maybe next, right now, every month, 10,000 cars will be increased, every month. So this is a big issue for us. But I think, public bars, and, other, transportation tools will be used in the next 5 years. And the parking price will be, increased next 5 years.
Are you very sensitive as Vice Mayor to this issue of the imperative, the absolute necessity to cope with the number of people who need to travel in your city?
I think this is a, sensitive issue, in the future.
And how will people travel in your enormous city in the future? Will it be by public transport or with their own transport?
Cars, I think that's the main, it's a, maybe, subway is fine, okay. In the downtown, and we have, I think so we have confidence with transportation system, not just the cars, not just the bus. We have, because this city, I think it's the old and plus new city, okay. We have time, we have an opportunity to plan the transportation plan, okay. I think this probably will be solved better in the future.
Let me pick up what Konrad was saying, and when I asked him whether not addressing sustainability was an option or not in every council. How much is sustainability, particularly the amount of heat coming out of, and energy coming out of buildings? How tough are you really on that for the city of the future? Because many of the buildings in Tianjin, they look very modern, they're very impressive, but there are many who suspect that they're not very environmentally friendly.
In terms of the government regulations, we, for such as materials, the building and construction materials, we have a plan. We have a plan to control the building materials. just maybe a sea energy. And we have a solar, solar energy and wind power energy, okay, in the city plan for the next 5 years.
Because what we've heard here is the importance of government, whether it be national government or local government or city government, in creating the regulations to ensure high standards.
I think most of the responsibility is the local government, is the city government. It's just like Tianjin municipal government. They control this field.
How much for your city is the imperative, the necessity to have economically and climatologically sustainable buildings now an absolute imperative? How much is it vital now for the development of your city to have buildings which are now more sustainable, which keep the heat in, which are more energy efficient?
For the budget?
For your city?
In my city? In this year or next year?
Well, for the future, what is being planned? What is being planned now?
Maybe half of the budget to invest in the sustainable, growth.
And what about the regulations for buildings? The regulations for buildings.
For the regulation building?
Well, the laws and the conditions.
Yeah, we have the law. Yeah, we have over tens, over dozens, regulations to control that.
Okay, look, anyone want to raise questions from the audience? And do you want to pick up on any of the points, Konrad or Phil or Khaled, from what we've just been hearing from Tianjin, from Phoenix, and your experience in Abu Dhabi at the moment? Nothing at the moment? Konrad.
One aspect was, I think, missing in the discussion. That's the role of urban planning, of master planning, and of development planning. So we have talked about houses. A house can be eco-efficient more or less, or wasteful more or less. A car can be emitting a lot. We did not talk about livable neighborhoods that are eco-efficient, that are built in a way that where people live, they can also where sort of jobs are close to the places where people live, and where the shops and bars and restaurants are close to it. So we did not talk about these patterns. So basically what I suspect is that many of the new cities, there is lots of residential areas where people are, in the literal sense, stored in high-rises, and very far away there are the shops, very far away there are the workplaces, which of course causes a lot of traffic. And I don't know what it is. Is it either a lack of prudent town and development planning, or is it just because, let's say, the city was given up, was handed over to investors, and it was following investors' needs and desires and actions, rather than that the community has determined what it wants in order to be able to live decently?
But of course, you have to live with what you have. You can't just suddenly redesign all those cities.
I'm talking about cities that have been built in the last 10 or 20 years, and lots of what we have seen in Tianjin or in Dubai is a product of the very recent past, and it's going on. And the question is, how long does it go on, into which direction?
And do you have an answer of the way it should now move?
Well, I think I have given the answer by calling for a paradigm shift, that one has to look at livable places that are eco-efficient, resilient, have a green economy, and are places of health and happiness, which means that probably the community needs to play a major role in designing what they want the city to be, rather than to leave the city as a business object to investors alone and talking only business language.
But I've got to press you on that before Khaled comes in. It's all very well saying the community must design it. The community, does it have time to design the kind of place it wants to live in? People are trying to, day by day, make their money, live in the kind of conditions in which they're living. It's all very well to say the community must do it. How does the community feed back and influence the property developers, influence the planners?
Well, let's just look at the very successful story of what we call Local Agenda 21 in the last 20 years. Where following an United Nations Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, '92, a whole wave was going around the work of cities and municipal decision makers, city decision makers, understanding that they need to involve the local public, the citizens, into developing a vision for the long-term development of their community.
And do they want to do that?
And they have to have done it. And we know about thousands of cities, maybe 5,000, that have engaged in these processes of Local Agenda 21.
Successfully?
Successfully, because they have arrived at a joint vision of where the city would want to go. And then the city planning, the decisions were more or less based on that. Of course, sometimes less, sometimes more. But it was a huge wave that ran around the world in thousands of communities where city decision makers and planners have actually involved citizens in developing the vision and developing the concepts for what they want the city
Phil,
to be.
have communities been very active in changing the way Phoenix is designed?
Actually, the city does engage the communities, but unfortunately, who gets to define what the community is? And,
Well, exactly.
and the business is a community, the residents, the nonprofits. I think personally, our city has been more successful when you do engage the community, but it's voluntary. You've got to make the case as to why that policy is changing, and little bits are easier to do than a whole sea change.
But does the community really want to get involved?
You know, if you can show an immediate return, the answer is yes. The problem with sustainability and what we're talking about, it's a long term, and people are busy. People don't have the money to invest in the future. So the answer, I think, is no, generally, not today if you were to generalize. But that's also then the role of government and community leaders.
But Konrad said there are 5,000 good examples now of that. Could you see this happening in Phoenix?
Oh, yes, most definitely.
Okay, Khaled.
I think why I'm coming from the business side is you know, back in the 1900s, we saw the intersection of the car industry with the oil industry. And ultimately, we had the urban sprawl and we had other issues. Today, we have the chance where information technology is really advanced enough to wait for construction or development in general to really come up with its own breakthrough to cross at this intersection where we have urbanization and sustainability also crossing. And I think it is in the hands of businesses and industries to come up with a formula that will empower communities to bring their own opinions. But if we continue receiving the results of the intersection of the car industry and the oil industry in cities, I think it will be very difficult to make the change. Today we have one thing, which is information technology. It's ahead of everyone. Construction and development is still, 80 years backward. Unless something like on that side happens, then we can resolve the clash that we have between urbanization and sustainability.
Fahd.
Well, I think we're just hitting one very important component, which is what is the role of the public? Yes, the government has a role. Yes, the private sector has a role. But the public has a big role. Unless each one of us in this room believe that they have a role in conservation and in sustainability, then I think we'll be missing the broader point, because the government will continue to provide power to the general public. The developers will continue to provide housing solutions, but unless the public is demanding and seeing their own responsibility for this, for addressing this challenge, I think we were still addressing half of the question.
Do you feel, as a developer, that you do feel enormous pressure from the community level upwards?
No, I don't think any developer right now around the world, honestly, feels this. Even in developed economies, I mean, you still see people getting into their cars and driving for an hour to work, and the government is imposing taxes. I mean, I'm talking about Europe and North America. They're putting carpool lanes for people to use. But still, people are not accepting their own responsibility. We're talking here about an ethic. This is not about rules. This is not about regulations. This is really about people taking responsibility. And the government needs to be involved through education and public awareness, I believe.
Let me ask Dr. Ren from Tianjin. I remember hearing your Prime Minister, Wen Jiabao, at the conference 2 years ago in Tianjin, saying he wanted people to respond from the bottom upwards by internet, by email, whatever. Do you feel public pressure, this community pressure, in a city like yours, which helps you change the way you are developing it?
I think that this is a good, way for us to listen to the public, to, improve our, work. For example, we have, urban planning, pavilion. So to show our, master plan to the public, this is a good idea for us to communicate with the local people.
Do you feel it's something which you have to do as you develop Tianjin, to listen to the public? Do they want to speak to you?
Yes, for example, we have, a mayor mailbox to get the information from the public. For example, the transportation problem, we can get, which street, which building it's not comfortable for them. We can get information, what to do to deal with this problem.
All right.
Immediately.
Let's have 2 or 3 more from the audience, and a microphone there, please. Would you all introduce yourself, please?
My name is Hiba Al-Sha'ar. I work with the Dubai Authority, Government of Dubai. Thank you very much for this forum and for starting the forum on the sustainability, because what we feel is the subject by itself, it's just like maybe on the 3rd item of the list of the word. And if they will take it as serious as like security, for example, I think we'll get better results. I just had one point of Mr. Rasheed in regards to the involving the public. And as you just asked Mr. Gowing to Mayor Gordon about how much the community are involved and how can we, just a question, an open question is, how can the government liaise literally and physically and really imposing the policies on public and private sector? Not just because I can see, for example, between Mr. Otto and Mr. Awad is like each one working separately. Maybe they have some CSR, maybe they have some, but at the same time there is no close relationship between the government and what they are planning for with the private sector.
And just to be clear, after what you said right at the beginning of your question, do you believe sustainability is taken seriously enough and addressed specifically? We've heard from Khaled, who's really rather negative about that in this region. What do you think?
No, it's not taken seriously. There are efforts, not enough, because we have to build the culture for it. We have to teach our children from the school, from grade 1.
But can we wait that long?
No, we can't. This is what I'm saying. It's like we, as a government, we have to work very closely with all the ministries, with the municipality, with the community, with the association, on all angles, as fast as we can.
But they are saying that it's government which has to lay the conditions and the regulations for moving forward. Otherwise, business doesn't respond.
Mr. Gowing, it's very easy just to throw the ball on anybody else. It's everybody's responsibility. It's the private sector, the government, my responsibility, everybody in this room responsibility. The media. The media can play a very big role in this part, because they are part of educating the public. So if during even their news, they're covering of issues, if they will alert to people that if you do this, it will harm your environment, it will harm your son, your mother, etc. So this is very, very important.
All right, let me go back to your question, Phil and Konrad, liaising.
If I could jump in, I think in order for it to be successful, sustainability, it's got to be market-driven. That's the definition of the private sector. So that the public has got to want sustainable things. In Phoenix, the homes that are selling today in Phoenix are those that are what we call LEED certified, are sustainable homes. They're the ones that are moving. So the market sector has started to move into that. The homes that are selling that are along the light rail line are at a premium. So I think the public is changing, but that's based on this economic savings to the public, and then the market adapts. So I think it's really important that government can't do enough to force it. I think if we can lay the foundation, the infrastructure, do what you talked about, the education, but then, get the public to want these things, then the market will follow. The other thing for Arizona, which is interesting, I should have brought out in the entire state, but the city, the citizens, the community can actually pass their own law with enough signatures to get on the ballot, and then the majority rules, or take away a law. So we can, it's called an initiative process. So in Phoenix, it's a tool that some of us use to actually create new policy where government doesn't necessarily want to go in that direction.
Do you sense, after what you've just said about the metro and the way there's a premium now on sustainable properties and so on, a wave of retrofitting about to happen? In other words, people beginning to work out that there's financial advantage?
Absolutely. The challenge, though, is when in our city there were so many naysayers, like you brought up. Nobody in a car city is going to ride the light rail. A big fight. It took leadership, government to stand up and say we're going to do it. And now it's how come I don't have it, which is a good problem, except
do you
today,
think there are votes in sustainability for you?
I think it does. The problem is...
So your re-election depends on sustainability?
Well, luckily I'm not running again, so...
if you were running again?
If I was running again today, 70% plus of the city of Phoenix wants it to be a sustainable city, a quality of life city. That's the problem is government today can't pay for those extensions, those infrastructure, so we got to go back to the private sector to make it profitable.
Konrad, that point about liaising, literally.
Liaising. Well, I find it strange when we all believe that everything is dependent on a business case and things only run if they are economically sort of beneficial. I think many of us have an anchor in whatever religion we have. Many of us have the sense that we are inheriting a world that we have to hand over to to the next generation, not only in a worse shape, but ideally in a better shape than we have inherited in. And it's a matter of ethics, as my neighbor already pointed out. And I think we should not just always forget about that. People are not only acting because it's economically beneficial. They are not only looking for money. They are looking for quality of life. They are looking to satisfy their own ethical principles. And if we look at consumption, even people don't follow always the economic rationale. Why are people driving oversized cars? Because they like them, not because it's the most economical way of moving. Why are people going to a movie? Because they want to enjoy it and they pay for it, and it's not the most economical way of spending your free time. So people are actually not always looking at the cheapest and most economical, but what they want and what they have the desire to do. So now people have more and more the desire to behave in a sustainable way, and they want to see a sustainable city.
Khaled, do you see that in this region? In this region?
I'm not saying this is the business case is the only reason. I'm saying we want a breakthrough. If you want to go slow and wait for people to realize in their awareness and in their coming up to the problems of tomorrow, yes, Konrad is right. If you want to take it, one community at a time, going from west to east at a slower pace, yes, of course, people will feel that the ethical behavior will actually determine, and the fun life will determine what they choose. But I'm talking about a radical change, something that will really take us quickly to where we want to go, not just go slowly about it. If you want to go slowly, we follow Konrad, and people will start having higher moral awareness, and then yes, with time, this will happen. If we have that time, I agree with him, this is the best way to do it. If you put the business case on top of what he's saying, then you have a major change. And this is what I'm saying. And again, waiting for the public to make the change, the public did not say, I want an iPad or an iPod. They got that, and then they used it and they embraced it. The public needs the businesses to come with a solution, the right ones for them, that they will like and they will love, and then they will embrace it.
When you hear Phil Gordon, the fifth largest city in the United States, saying this public pressure from the bottom up, could you see that happening in this region? This mood for change, you call it.
Well, I think you should show them the model first before you tell them put pressure on governments. They don't know what the model is. What is the model that we are presenting to them? What is the business model and what is the life model that you want them to say yes or no to? Metro, they will embrace it. It will take some time. But I think you will see that people will start using the metro more and more with time, and that I think will follow the Phoenix model.
Fahd, Rasheed, from your point of view, do you think you are creating a clarity on the new model for the public in Saudi Arabia?
I think when we know, for example, in the project that we are creating, that we will not need a metro for 30 years.
30?
Yes, because of the population growth in the city. But we are still planning it anyway, to be there so that we have...
So you are going to build it?
Yes, but eventually when we need it. So the biggest problem with creating these things is planning. I think when we're talking about sustainability, we mistake this word for for either oversimplification. Is this building green or it's not? And I think we need to make it a broader term that addresses the true issues at heart.
But you can know whether a building is green or not by the energy that's escaping and by...
Yeah, yes, absolutely. You can, I'm saying you shouldn't call sustainability just having a green building and whether it is LEED certified platinum or not. What I'm saying is today, you need to think about the community planning. You need to think about what this community will entail in 20 years and think about how the transportation works, how people move within that, going from job to work to entertainment, and how they use what kind of materials are built. Are they local material or are they, internationally bought materials? I mean, there are so many things, and the issue is so complicated. Unless you look at it holistically, honestly, you're just paying it lip service.
Konrad, do you think everyone is thinking smartly enough, given that you're saying what's happened in the last 20 or 30 years is systems and designs which simply are not correct for what we're now trying to do?
Yeah, no, I think many things go right and many things go wrong. And let me bring back sustainability to what the word means. Sustainability is the ability to be sustained. So let's look at urban systems, let's look at the amount of car use, let's look at the ecological footprint of a city. In which case is that able to be sustained? If let's say Dubai has one of the highest car use rates in the world, among the cities in the world, is that able to be sustained? The highest ecological footprint in the world among all the cities, is that able to be sustained? I think for me, that's the basic question. Do we create a system that we can maintain over long term and hand over to our children without compromising their ability to develop and satisfy their needs?
Deputy Mayor, do you see that? An ecological footprint, can it be sustained? Do you think that way in Tianjin as well? What ecological footprint do we have, and can it be sustained or should it be sustained?
For the eco-city? Yeah.
Well, not just for the eco-city, but the city that there is there at the moment. I mean, Konrad, do you want to explain a little bit more for Mr. Wren about what you're saying?
Yeah, what I was meaning is that if to satisfy one person's needs, you need a lot of energy, you need a lot of land, and at an extraordinary amount of cost. In comparison, in other places, people live and are satisfied with a lesser input of energy and a lesser input of space and so on. So that's the concept of the footprint. So I was just saying the higher the footprint is, the higher the per capita amount of energy use is or water use is, the less I feel it can be sustained over longer term. So that I feel a city is better off when it's very efficient, has a low footprint and a low energy and water consumption per capita.
That's right. So Tianjin, Tianjin is a water shortage. Not just per capita for the water in China less than 25%, but Tianjin just 6%. Just give you an example. But we have 4 measures to deal with this, just like water, shortage. So one is to use the distillation, the seawater, okay. And the second, we have a good pricing, water pricing, control. Maybe use a lot of water, you need to pay a lot of money, okay. The second, we need to educate the children to, to save the water. And the fourth, we have a plan to transfer the north of China's water, south of China's water to this city. Yeah.
Thank you. Right. How many more people would like to ask questions? I can see 4 or 5. We have 20 minutes, and I want to get as many questions as possible. Please, there first.
Thank you, Nick, and many thanks for your distinguished speakers. Hearing all these different perspectives, I must say that I must agree with Konrad and Rasheed, that the issue or the challenge before us today isn't only about economic model or economic viability, it's more about the hearts, winning the hearts and minds of people. Is there any best practices or initiatives that took place that you know of that could help us in this battle? Thank you.
All right, that's an important point. I've been trying to get an answer, but we haven't quite got there, so thanks for pushing it as well. At the back there, please.
Yes, my name is Mahmoud Al-Bastaki. I think sustainability became a buzzword that we overkill it, and I think I'm just asking a question here. Is there like a unanimous decision or unanimous definition of what sustainability is that is agreed in China and Saudi Arabia and France and US, that we all agree that this is the ABCs of sustainability, and who are the stakeholders? I don't think it can be done by the government alone or by the people or by the developer or by the municipality. What is the distinct role of each stakeholder? And
right.
Is there any good model for sustainability that we can, as the gentleman, I think I asked the same questions.
We could have a one-week conference on the definition of sustainability. We're not going to get an answer by 3 o'clock, but let's put that on the agenda. There's a lady behind you with the microphone, and you've got the mic. Do you have the microphone or not? No. Okay, we'll get the microphone, please.
Okay. My name is Dr. Muhammad Nagi. I'm Director of the Infrastructure Sustainability Research Center here at the American University in Dubai. And I guess I have the right to welcome you here in our campus. It was a very interesting discussion. One issue, just comments about what Mr. Khaled Awad mentioned in the beginning about the materials and the cement and the American Concrete Institute issues. We know that actually cement produces a lot of carbon dioxide. This has been known. But I guess Khaled always pushing to get a radical change to happen, in terms of the sustainability in the construction field. But my point that we should not ignore the effort that people are doing, especially here in the UAE, in the concrete industry. Replacing major part of the cement in the concrete we use now in the buildings and the infrastructures with byproducts like fly ashes from power plant, where we use slag from steel industries, pozzolanic materials. Now the producer actually use recycled water from washing trucks and reuse it in the concrete. There's a lot of recycled aggregate from old buildings also used. And now the concrete producers, some of them have what we call it carbon dioxide calculators. When they do the concrete, they calculate how much CO2 will be saved or reduced.
I think we're getting the message there. So is there a particular question?
So this is actually just, I'm going to elaborate on this point.
Okay, thank you.
If you allow me, I guess. It's okay? Yeah. So the other thing I have just to emphasize in the city of Phoenix, I know it's probably compared to other cities, the state of Arizona is doing a lot, the universities actually in Arizona doing more research in sustainability than other colleges in the state. Okay, we cannot probably start from the kindergarten, but we can educate college students as what we are doing now here in a lot of universities about sustainability issues, and probably build the momentum in the public, as everybody talking about, to educate the people about what we need to do for sustainability issues.
Thank you. Pass it along, please. And the lady with the microphone there.
Can I speak now?
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, it feels so good to have you all appearing on this Dubai scene on sustainability. Like
well, we're talking about the future of cities, actually.
Yeah, future of the cities, which is one of the concern of sustainability, like because people are speaking so much about.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm working in a service industry where I study the design of water supply systems and services to oil and gas industry. But I've studied sustainability for a year at Cambridge, and it feels so good to be here present in this discussion. So my question is, we have been talking a lot about this word, and I've heard here, and it's kind of intriguing, responsibility. Now, as one of the person sitting here said, that sustainability is the ability to sustain. Now, responsibility is an ability to respond. Now, do you think, I have an open question to all of the panelists, how could we improve the response of the people, or the ability of the people to respond.
Right, okay. I've been capturing some of these. We've got responsibility, ability, and sustainability. A lot of ability there.
Yeah, a lot of
But that last question mixes in with that first question about best practice, about what the best practice is, about how to meet these challenges, linked in with responsibility and ability. I invite you to give a very short answer on how you define sustainability. Do we have agreement? But Khaled, first coming to you, to concrete, do you accept what we've just heard, that actually there are efforts in a place like the UAE and certainly Dubai to make it more sustainable?
On a worldwide level, there are efforts, of course. What I'm saying is that just want to take it to a second level, to a much more quicker level.
It's not enough.
Not enough, no.
Compared to the science out there in the rest of the
and
world.
compared to the emissions, the growth of emissions from that industry is still high. We're still growing in emissions in concrete worldwide. The CO2 coming from concrete construction is increasing, not reducing.
Are you saying there should be tighter government regulations on concrete?
Either that or incentives. So let's not maybe misunderstand the point of regulation. More incentives in this direction.
Let me ask you about best practice. Phil, Konrad?
First, I think it's important, we've all talked about it, it's a balance. It's not just government or the private sector or the community. There's best practices in specificity of different things. Our best practice I would recommend is, instead of building a water sewer treatment plant that costs a lot of money, that then uses a lot of energy, we actually use the environment, working with Arizona State University, thank you for reminding, School of Sustainability, and use the environment. We used the river bottoms, the dry river bottoms, to actually purify the water enough so that it could go back into the ground, and we ended up creating a natural habitat where the animals, the birds, which then created tourism back. We saved millions of dollars of building a physical plant. We actually have now purer treated water than a normal plant. That's called Trace Rios, if anybody's interested in it. We can do that best practice. But it's using science, I think today, proven technology, not new cutting-edge technology, because we can't afford to make the mistake as, I think, a community and city. And therefore, whether it's water, whether it's solar, best practice that I described, there's a number of them. If you get on the internet, which is, I think, what is the best thing for sustainability, you'll see every city and every country has a whole myriad of best practices, and what best suits one's environment is different from place to place.
Is that the kind of answer you're looking for on best practice? Is that the kind of answer you're looking for on best practice? Margaret, could you just push back?
Because what I heard from...
Red microphone, red microphone.
Hello? Yeah, so I heard that pretty much the world that we know today is very much different than the world of tomorrow. So I was looking for things more about, innovative, initiatives that really wins the hearts and minds.
Right, we're looking for new ideas. Konrad.
I think those initiatives exist. It's difficult for me now to point out specific cities. I can do it sort of afterwards, or in a bilateral communication or correspondence, because there are actually hundreds of good cases that have their merits in terms of how as you say, hearts and minds of people are being taken into account, how preference of people can go into the planning, and how can planning respond to people's needs. I would particularly say best practices have been developed in the whole wave of local Agenda 21 processes that have taken place, as I said, in thousands of cities worldwide. So I'm happy to provide specific reference if you wish afterwards.
Anyone else on best practice? What about that question about defining sustainability? You've got a minute, no more, if anyone wants to. Or is it clear, even if we can debate the nuances?
I think it's assuring the prosperity of future generations, both socially, economically, and environmentally.
Only future generations?
At least by doing actions today, by taking the right actions today to assure the triple bottom line for today and future generations, of course.
Deputy Mayor, let me ask you, your definition of sustainability, it's very clearly embedded now in the 5-year plan and the next 5-year plan. Is there clarity in China now about what sustainability is? He was asking about the definition of sustainability.
So I need, balance between, faster growth and the social, needs, and we need to take use of a new technology and allocation the resource to make the growth for the next 5 years. But we need to care about the people needs. The balance is very important for us.
Phil Gordon, sustainability, do you have a clarity as a mayor?
No.
No, you said no. You said no.
We can't agree, I would venture to say, on us up here on the podium, much less in a community, a city, a state, a nation. I believe sustainability is quality of life, and what maintains one's quality of life is really what we're talking about.
Because business thinks it's sustaining profits.
But each business will have a different definition of what that is and how much profit or what sustainability is. I think we get too hung up on what the definition is. I think the best thing is best practices that both will help the community, the environment, and also will save us money.
But he surely raises a very important question. If we can't actually agree on what sustainability is, should we be how can we talk about it when it comes to the future of cities?
Because I think we're putting the horse before the cart. Again, what are we talking about is being able to maintain quality of life. To each of us, that may be in a different area.
Fahd.
No, I think we should remove the word sustainability completely.
So we should forget everything we've talked about.
No,
for the
actually,
last
we should forget it for a little bit and then focus on everything we do on how we can sustain it economically, socially, and environmentally. I think if we're still addressing corporate social responsibility, environmental responsibility, we are already behind the ball. It has to be a complete change, a system change in the way we do things.
Especially in cities.
In cities, but in our daily lives ourselves as well.
Right, let's get a few more views. The view from water.
I'm Margaret Catley-Carlson, the Water Agenda Security Council here. I've been delighted to hear about cities talking about reducing water use, because you've got 3 very short of water cities here. What I'm not hearing so much about, although we got it from Mayor Gordon, is reusing and recycling water, because the city of the future has to be looking at water differently. Some Australian cities have cut down by 80% the amount of new water coming in every year by reducing and reusing, and as well as recycling. So there's new models out there, they're very exciting. They cut down on energy, because one of the major factors in how much water you've got is how much energy you use to get there. So I would just say this has to go on the agenda. I've been delighted to hear the emphasis on transport and energy, add water in. You haven't forgotten it. I'm just saying you're talking reducing, get recycling and reusing in there too.
We'll come to that in a moment. Margaret. Okay, over there. And who else wants? Over there, please. Gentleman there. You've got a microphone?
Yes.
I'll go to this gentleman here first. I'll come to you in a moment.
My name is Michael Cannon from Dubai Aviation City Corporation. And I think the proof of the lack of a good operational definition of what you're talking about is the empty auditorium. But I also think that if you took a profile of who's here, you would see that there are people who are either directly interested in this or will benefit some way economically from it. So you most definitely have an operational definition problem in the language that you're using. And let me just give you 2 examples, and perhaps the panelists could talk about this. In Brazil, there are 40 million children who don't have clean water. How about providing the world with clean water? A friend of mine in Denver, Colorado is the head of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory efforts to reduce heat loss from existing buildings. How about reduction of heat loss? Those things communicate to the public. We can help you reduce heat loss, energy loss, save you money. We can provide children with clean water, clean sewer, and reduce premature death. I hate to be dramatic, but talking to an audience that is has the same mindset as you, uses the same language as you, doesn't spread the concept.
Would you like to offer a view of how this could be spread further?
I think
I worked in Denver with the government on putting in the Urban Land Institute form-based code. And we held audiences all over the city, public announcements, on the news, advertising, and nobody showed up. Nobody showed up until we told them about, well, if your house or your residence is close to the light rail, your value of your property goes up. When we held things there, we had explosive attendance. So to take issue with Mr. Otto-Zimmermann's point, I think if we can get it to things that people feel every day in their life, you can have an impact on their ethics.
Right.
They begin to see the issue.
Right. Let me just get one more intervention from the gentleman at the back.
Hi, my name is Yuvraj, and I'm from the Winchester School, Dubai. I would like to point out what Mr. Rasheed said. He pointed out about the implementation of new technologies. He said that it should be first tested by the government, and after that the private companies will use it. But that will lead to a lot of red tapeism. It take a lot of time, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, for the implementation of new technologies. So shouldn't the public and private sector work hand in hand on these?
Right. Let me just go back to that second point there, Khaled.
You asked us to define sustainability in a broad sense.
No, I didn't.
No, I mean, generally speaking, as a topic, sustainability locally has different definitions because of priorities. If you talk to South Africa, combating AIDS is more sustainable than building green buildings. And this is where you have to take it to the local society where you're in. And when we say that, waiting for the people's morale to go up is not enough, I mean that we need incentives to bring them up. We need to really incentivize people so they feel about their ethical values better when they're associated with the problem. But of course, sustainability means different things to different societies.
But that challenge, based on Denver, how do we fill this auditorium discussing this kind of issue in a place like Dubai?
I mean, start with the car. Whenever you can avoid using a car, then you are doing something.
Yeah, but how do we fill this auditorium? Because everyone's going to come by car to get here.
Yeah, well, this is where I said the government is behind. We need incentives not to use the car. And this is where
but even to come to a forum like this, discussing this.
Well, they could have come with the metro, at least.
Yeah, but how do we fill the auditorium next time?
I don't know about the marketing that went up, but maybe we should say that, how you make money or how your business will thrive, or how you can have a better, lower energy bill in your house, lower water bill in your house. Dubai has done some measures 2 years ago to increase the water and energy bills, and people are starting to feel the heat of this. So come and learn how to reduce your energy bill and water bills by endorsing some action.
So the next forum will be Cities of the Future, how we can save you money.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Or make you
this
money.
is where the business issue comes in.
I was just going to say, though, the paradigm of filling an auditorium, I think, is old. It's, again, with the internet, with the rebroadcasting, with the social media, which we understand this is on. I mean, probably 100 times many more people watching this.
So we should have a Twitter feed up there, or an email feed.
Absolutely. I mean, as government leaders, we found using the social media is more influential and the ability to reach the public than using the old print media.
Konrad, mobilizing people to come and fill an auditorium like this on these critical issues, the community you're talking about.
Of course, I realize that societies are very different, economies are very different, and cultures are extremely different from place to place. And one has to always see sort of where to take it from. I hear sort of societies to my right that respond best to prices or to arguments in terms of cost, economic benefits. I see societies that respond to let's say, ethical calls. And so I'm not an expert for Dubai, but the question is, could the community be mobilized to take part in a discussion like this by us not sitting in this university, but going out into a neighborhood?
Okay, these are important ideas. Let me pick up on Margaret's point as well about reusing and recycling water. Fahd, how much is that integral to your planning in Saudi Arabia? The recycling and reuse of water?
Well, I'll get to that, but I think having lived in the US for a while, environmental issues never really became part of pop culture until Al Gore made that movie. So I think the issue of popularizing these issues and making them common language, I think is key. I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm sure we can have another session how to do this.
We could fill this auditorium for a week at this rate.
Exactly. But again, if you have something like a movie or some kind of promotional activity that actually brings in the younger crowds, etc., it will be quite interesting. In terms of water use, Saudi Arabia actually has 20% of the global desalination capacity. And it's investing a lot of money into figuring out how to best reuse its water resources. What we are doing in King Abdullah Economic City is basically now using the recycled water for irrigation of landscaping, for use in different areas. We are getting to a point now in Jeddah where we are actually recycling sewage for even to a level of drinking quality.
So this is like Singapore?
Yeah, but again, this is all about the diffusion of technology. We talked a lot about best practice. We talked about a lot about new ideas. Unless these new ideas and these new technologies become common practice, we are, again, still behind the ball.
Is it seen as a planning imperative, given that there's water stress everywhere, whether you're in an old city or a new city?
Absolutely. Everything is about planning.
No, but water particularly.
Yeah, water definitely. And you're talking about a problem that the whole world will be facing. Understanding that we were going to have 9 billion people in the world in 2050, and what kind of water use they would have. That is a challenge and a big planning issue.
Phil Gordon, Arizona is not blessed with a lot of water, and stress of water is acute there. When you look at some of the models developed around the world in major conurbations now, like in Singapore, which is almost totally self-supporting now, a lot from runoff and recycling and so on, what are you learning about the answer to Margaret's question about reuse and recycling?
Well, it's critical for the future. Singapore, I would say, is best practice model for a city in terms of reuse of water.
But forced in that direction, simply because...
Forced in that direction, again, market-driven in the sense of survival. But again, that water, reprocessed water, they call it new water, treated water, is actually purer than their groundwater and even our groundwater in Phoenix, and by most world standards. The future of water is critical. In Phoenix, in Arizona, you're required as government to show a 100-year supply based on the most conservative estimates even today before you can issue a permit. That's because Dubai, Phoenix, desert cities, I think in particular, understood the value of water and how precious and how fluid it was, figuratively. I think a lot of, at least in the U.S., eastern cities that really never experienced till global warming has put it front door, water shortages, is now trying to figure out how to move to the future. Actually, a number of the desert cities, particularly in Arizona, are better off in water than the eastern cities because of what we've learned, both technology, storage, reuse, readaptive use. We're also using a lot of the effluent water, just as an aside, particularly for this area, to cool our nuclear plant. Phoenix has the largest nuclear plant in the world, which now is seen by the sustainable movement as a good renewable energy source. And so we're using the effluent for the cooling side, which is an economic model, by the way, for the city to make money.
Konrad, in the paradigm, the new thinking that you say needs to happen, the paradigm shift, how central, it's all very well talking about roads and metros and designs, how central is overcoming water stress to every single plan that you know about in the councils you know about?
Well, I think this is just one of the key issues for not only urban development, but determining whether there's a future for that city. Because we are going towards a future with more water stress in more places, quite clearly, due to climate change. And we have already so much water stress in so many regions. So that water efficiency is just one key to not only sustainability, but survival. So I would, and I see not only, as Margaret says, that in Australia, but in many, many other places, water-saving programs actually driven by the local governments are taking place. And of course, where water is priced and where water has a high price, also the economics help saving water, because that means saving money.
Xuefeng, final thought to you. How much is your concern about water going to actually limit the expansion of your city, your conurbation of Tianjin?
Yes, just as I mentioned, in Tianjin it is water shortage. Just like you said, we need to use the recycling water. We have a case how to use the sea water to generate the power. In Tianjin we have we call Tianjin Northern Power Plant. Introduced the million kilowatt class, ultra supercritical units allocated with flood pan water intaking and seawater cooling tower technology, a new model of the generation. We can, seawater desalination and salt manufacturing, and land saving and water recycle was formed, worked together. So this is how finished this project. It's successful.
Khaled, let me come to you finally. We've heard there the reminder about water stress. How much is there acute consciousness in this region with all the projects you're working on?
Let me take it from a global point of view first. There is no water scarcity, there is a water management problem. And I think the issue is water management, not water. We have so much water, but the water management is wrong because the business case is wrong. People are not incentivized to save water enough from the system. I mean, you have 30 or 40% leakages in most cities around the world in the water infrastructure. And we try to educate people to save water, which is a good thing to do, but the maximum we can achieve through that is 5 to 10%. 30 to 40% of the water is just wasted because of leakages.
And will that water reality limit urban development?
Unless you change the business model where people or companies who are in the water management business are incentivized for saving water. If you produce less water, you get more money. If you get the water management company or the water supplier, the private water supplier, to actually be incentivized and rewarded for savings, then when you change the business case, yes, you achieve much bigger savings than just by educating people. And that ties with what I was saying about the business case.
Last thought, please, Phil.
One topic that we didn't discuss and I think is critical to the reduction of use of energy is the smart meters that are coming out today, where you have instantaneous two-way review, communication of what you're using. That translates to dollars to the consumer, and habits change immediately where you can see how much you're using and what that costs in dollars. I think that's going to go a long way to both hit the moral side and the economic side, where we can be watching the type of energy, whether it's in a car or in the home or in a business, immediately.
I've got one in my kitchen, and it's frightening sometimes when you switch on something and you realize how the dial has gone up. We've covered an enormous amount in 90 minutes, but we could cover much more. Next time we will fill this auditorium. There's clearly a lot of interest. Can I thank you all very much indeed, including for staying here during the 90 minutes, and let's keep the discussion going. But thank you for joining us at this open forum. There is more to come through the afternoon and early evening. Thank you. Thank you.